Hey everybody, how's it going? The purpose of this video is to look at this thing called the business cycle and how it applies to a whole pile of things in economics. At the end of the day, the business cycle is about understanding whether the economy is improving or getting worse and what sort of direction it's going to go in the future. So, it lets people understand as it says the direction of GDP. Remember, GDP is gross domestic product. That's how much of the value of everything we produce in the economy in a year. And the business cycle tells us whether that's growing, slowing in terms of growth, or shrinking, and then plan accordingly. So the economy follows the business cycle regularly. Sometimes, well, it changes for all sorts of different reasons, which we'll look at. But most Western economies, in particular, tend to go through these cycles. So there are four phases you need to know about. The first one is expansion or recovery, otherwise known as when the economy is growing. The peak or the boom is the when the economy is ripping along, doing really well, growing quickly. Then economies often at some point, start into a downturn where things are slowing down. We're still growing, but not as fast as we were. And the bottom of the cycle is called a trough, which is the slowest, I guess, part of economic growth that you have in the cycle. Yep. Okay, so here's an example of a business cycle. So the first thing I want you to pay attention to is over on the left-hand side here. Oh, nope. On the left-hand side where it says economic growth, it's a percentage change in GDP, in real GDP. So notice where 0% is here. It's not on the bottom of the axis, it's in the middle there. So anything above that 0% means the economy is growing. Okay, anytime the line is above 0%, the economy is growing. So you can see that at the highest rate of growth up here, we're at the peak. This is most likely not a boom, that's fine. It could be, it's a 4% growth would be pretty good. And then the bottom of the cycle is the trough. It says not a recession. We'll get back to that, but a recession requires negative growth. That little point there is above zero, so we're still growing. It's just the slowest or lowest point in this particular business cycle. Then we have a recovery period, and in the end, we peak out at the highest level of growth. We're into a peak, and then we're into a downturn or contraction. Now, I don't really like this term contraction. So long as GDP is growing above 0%, the economy is still growing. It's not a contraction. When we get below 0%, then we are having a contraction. That means we're producing less from one year to the next. So literally the size of the economy is getting smaller. So that's a negative only when we have negative growth. Otherwise, it's just a downturn. Then as the economy starts to pick up again, we have the recovery or upturn, and so on and so forth. Now, I stole this from the Economic Tutors website, which is why it refers to Australia's current trend rate of economic growth. That would be okay, around 3% considerable growth. Let's have a look at New Zealand, though. Right, here's New Zealand. So this was in the 2024 budget. Produced by the Treasury and Stats New Zealand, so the Treasury being the economic advisors for the government, I guess. And again, you'll see, notice that 0% is not down the bottom. It actually goes to negative 2% growth. So this is real GDP growth for New Zealand. Okay, and you'll see it goes up and down all over the place. 2014, 2015, we had a peak. Just over 4% growth, and then it started to slow down a bit to a bit of a downturn in 2018. Now, this one's a bit artificial because suddenly things plummeted in 2020. What happened in 2020? We had COVID, we had lockdowns, everyone stopped shopping, well, except for online. And so we actually ended up with a period of negative growth. Okay, so that would be a contraction. We didn't just slow down, we put the brakes on and stood on them. And the economy almost, didn't stop, but slowed down substantially. But then we came out of lockdowns and things took off. People saved all this money by being at home, and then suddenly they started spending it, and suddenly you see growth kicked up to over 6%. Now that's really unusual for New Zealand. Normally 3-4% is a good growth rate, and you'll see it quickly settle back down again. It's gone all over the place. So we've got quite the business cycle going on, and you'll see again a slowdown, I guess, from 2022 to 2024. there's been a slowdown in the economy. There is two lines there. That's just two different, forecasts of data. So the economy's really put on the brakes, and you'll see just in 2024, almost down to zero. Okay, so we pretty much got to the point where the economy was not growing in 2024, and the rest of this is forecast. Okay, after that, so this has been recorded in December 2024. So the forecast is over 2025, maybe about 2% growth. 2026, they're hoping for around 3% growth. So that would be an upturn in the business cycle. All right, so you can see it's gone all over the place, but most economies go through this sort of cycle. Okay, so what does that mean? So let's start again. So based on that forecast, we should in 2025 be in a recovery or upturn, or an expansion period. So that means we should see some wage increases and falling unemployment, which is good because unemployment's up around 5%, I think, at the moment. People start to become more optimistic and start to spend money. Higher demand for goods. New businesses think might not be a bad time to start opening up because they're looking ahead and seeing some expansion. Tends to start being easier to get a bank loan because banks are looking ahead and thinking more things are looking up, and businesses are making a profit, and stock or share prices start to increase. The downside of all that, inflation tends to increase because of demand. Depends on other factors, but inflation would be the concern. The peak obviously is the top, as I said, maximum growth rate. GDP growth reaches its maximum. Businesses struggle to produce any more. Okay, the resources are hard to get. Good workers are hard to get, and that's often what brings on the end of the business cycle and the slowdown, because the economy literally reaches full employment of resources. It gets really tricky. So then we might go into a downturn. Now, we need to ignore COVID because that was an aberration, a black swan event, if you like. But most economies start to go into a downturn because costs are going up. Businesses start to cut back production, start to lay off people, make them redundant because they're trying to cut costs, and they're looking ahead thinking that things aren't going to keep going as well. So unemployment starts to increase. And so the number of jobs and vacancies decline. So one of the things that the Reserve Bank and Treasury monitor is how many jobs have been advertised. And so less jobs are being advertised as businesses just try to be more careful with what they're doing. People start to get more pessimistic and stop spending money, which obviously actually makes things worse if they stop spending money, because then businesses think things aren't going so good and they lay more people off. Banks, they say stop lending money. They don't stop lending money, but they are much more cautious about lending money. On the upside, inflation tends to go down because there's less demand for goods and services. The trough is simply the bottom of the whole cycle, as I've said. It's the bottom, the lowest rate of growth, the lowest point. Unemployment is at its highest. Now, what exactly high is depends on the economy. For New Zealand, anything over about 5% would probably be high. Spending is low because people are low on confidence. Businesses are low on confidence. But the only way to go should be up unless we hit a recession or a depression. Now, make sure you know this definition for a recession. Recession is a contraction of real GDP of 2 or more quarters. So 6 months, in other words. If the economy shrinks in terms of what we're producing over 6 months or more, that's a recession. 3 months? No. 4 months? No. 6 months? Recession. Okay. If that continues for over a year, that would be a depression. That's only happened once, and that was almost 100 years ago. But we've had some close calls. So lately, as I said, in 2024, we had down to 0% growth basically for a period of time, but we haven't actually been in recession technically. Right, so what keeps the business cycle going? What's all these ups and downs? So key is business investment. If businesses are looking ahead and things are going well, profits are rising, they invest in new plants and equipment. That creates new jobs and more expansion. And a contraction, the opposite is true. If they're not sure about how things are going, they go the other way, stop investing, stop employing. So businesses are really important, and they're looking ahead. It's about what's happening, what they think is going to happen in the future. Interest rates, super important. Low interest rates, people can borrow, people can spend, people can invest as a company to expand. That's great. If interest rates are high, that's more expensive for businesses and consumers, and they spend less, and growth dries up. Consumer expectations, similar to business, really important if you're looking ahead and things are looking good. Jobs, lots of jobs out there, great. People spend more. People are worried about that, they spend less, and that slows the economy down. And the other group of external factors, COVID would be a perfect example. Sometimes there are things we have no control over. Oil prices, if they go up, that's a big expense for a lot of businesses. That has a negative effect. If they go down, great, but we have no control over that really. Wars, the Ukraine war actually had quite a big effect on the price of wheat across the world. We have no control over that. So, and that was bad. And trade wars. So at the time of making this video, future President Trump was threatening big tariffs on any products being sold to the US. If that happens, hopefully by the time you get this video, you can look at that. If that happens, that could have a really negative effect on world trade. And we're a big trading country. We need to be able to sell our goods to other countries. So watch that one because it could have a big effect on world growth. And if the world growth is not happening, it'll have an effect on growth in New Zealand. Right, so why else might we care about this? Oh, sorry, no. Government policies are also important. Let's come back to that. Government policies, what are they doing? They can use government policies to affect the business cycle by increasing or decreasing government spending. If they want to try and speed up or slow down the economy, or increasing or decreasing taxes, that can have an effect as well. And as mentioned, interest rates are important because they can be used to put the brakes on the economy by pumping interest rates up, and low interest rates can speed it up as people get to borrow to spend because it's not going to cost them very much. That's the Reserve Bank's monetary policy, the Reserve Bank's area. But keep an eye on that one. It's really important. 2025, we are expecting interest rates to fall, which will help the economy. And that's it. Hopefully you've learned a bit about the business cycle. Keep an eye on the news and what's happening with the economy. See if those forecasts we talked about earlier of around 2% growth in 2025 and maybe 3% in 2026 actually come about. Thanks. See you later.